The black luxury car slowed down as it turned onto the broken street, its tires rolling over cracked asphalt like it didn't belong there. People on the sidewalk didn't look twice. Cars like that passed through sometimes, never stopping, never caring. But this one stopped. Inside the car, the man in the back seat hadn't moved in several seconds. His hand rested on the door handle, frozen. His eyes were locked on a small, run-down diner across the street. The paint on the sign was peeling. One letter was missing. The windows were foggy, tired, like they had seen too much life. His chest tightened. 15 years ago, this place had saved his life. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavier. Drops tapped against the window like fingers knocking on memory, and suddenly the present cracked open. A barefoot boy stood in the rain, stomach aching, pride burning hotter than hunger. He had been pretending all day that he wasn't starving, pretending he didn't care, pretending he wasn't invisible. Then a girl had appeared. A black girl no older than him, wearing a faded hoodie 2 sizes too big. She hadn't asked questions. She hadn't looked afraid. She just broke her sandwich in half and held it out like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Eat," she had said. That moment changed everything. Back in the car, the man swallowed hard. He was rich now, powerful, untouchable according to magazines and business blogs. But standing there in his tailored suit, staring at that diner, he felt like that hungry boy again, small, ashamed, and still owing the biggest debt of his life. He remembered laughing back then, trying to sound confident, trying to sound like someone who mattered. "I'll marry you when I'm rich," he had joked. The girl had laughed too. But later, when she thought no one was watching, she had held onto those words like they meant something. The car door finally opened. Rain soaked his shoes as he stepped onto the street. People glanced at him now, confused, curious. No one recognized him. No one knew why a man with everything would come back to a place the world had already forgotten. Across the street, inside the diner, a woman wiped down the counter slowly. Her face was older now, stronger, tired in a way only time and survival could create. She looked up. And in that moment, everything he had built, everything he had run from, everything he had promised but never returned to, came rushing back. What they didn't know was that this reunion would force the truth into the open and change both their lives forever. Years earlier, long before the luxury car and the tailored suit, the boy's name was Ethan, and the world had already decided he didn't matter. He was 10 years old when he learned how to sleep with one eye open. 12 when hunger stopped feeling sharp and started feeling normal. His father had disappeared into bottles and bad decisions. His mother had disappeared into a hospital room that never let her come back out. After that, Ethan became one more child the city learned to step around. Shelters were crowded, foster homes were temporary, promises were cheap. So Ethan learned not to ask for anything. He washed windshields at traffic lights, carried groceries for strangers who never learned his name. When winter came, he slept behind buildings where the heat vents leaked warm air like mercy. What scared him most wasn't the cold, it was being seen and still ignored. That was how he ended up behind the diner. The place smelled like grease, burnt coffee, and old hope. Most days, Ethan stood near the back door pretending he was waiting for someone. In truth, he was waiting for leftovers to hit the trash. That's when Naomi Turner noticed him. Naomi was 11, small for her age, with braids that her grandmother redid every Sunday night no matter how tired she was. She lived in the tiny apartment above the diner, sharing one bedroom with her grandmother, Ruth. Ruth cleaned office buildings at night and walked home before sunrise. Naomi helped wherever she could, sweeping floors, wiping tables, carrying plates too big for her arms. She noticed everything. She noticed the boy who never begged, the way his hands shook when food was nearby, the way he turned his face away whenever someone came close, like shame had taught him how to hide. One afternoon, Naomi wrapped up a sandwich instead of throwing it away. She didn't make a big deal of it, didn't announce her kindness. She just walked outside, sat on the back steps, and waited. When Ethan finally approached, she split the sandwich in half like it was already decided. "Eat," she said. Ethan hesitated. Pride fought hunger, hunger won. From that day on, they met behind the diner whenever they could. Naomi brought food. Ethan brought stories, some real, some made up, all designed to make himself seem bigger than he felt. He told her he'd be rich one day, that he'd own buildings, that no one would ever look down on him again. Naomi listened. She always listened. Her life wasn't easy either, but it was different. Her grandmother believed in dignity the way some people believe in God. Even when money was tight, Ruth insisted Naomi walk tall, speak clearly, and never apologize for existing. Still, Naomi saw how the world treated them differently. She saw the way customers frowned when they noticed her sharing food with a white boy, heard whispers about trouble and bad looks. Once, a cook told her to stop before people got the wrong idea. Naomi didn't stop, because hunger didn't care about race, and kindness didn't ask permission. Over time, their conversations grew quieter, deeper. Sitting on milk crates under buzzing alley lights, they talked about fears they never shared with anyone else. Ethan feared becoming nothing. Naomi feared being stuck forever. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the city glowed orange, Ethan laughed too loudly, trying to impress her again. "When I'm rich," he said, "I'll come back for you, I'll marry you, you'll see." Naomi laughed, but later that night, lying on the floor beside her grandmother's bed, she whispered the words to herself like they might keep her safe. Then the world intervened. Police started patrolling the area more aggressively. New signs appeared. Words like redevelopment and clearance floated through conversations adults didn't think kids understood. One day, Ethan didn't show up. Then another, and another. Naomi waited. She checked the back alley, asked around. No one had answers. What she didn't know was that Ethan had been caught stealing bread. That a social worker, half kind and half tired, had offered him a way out, a shelter 2 cities away. No guarantees, just distance. Ethan left without a goodbye because goodbyes hurt too much. Because he told himself Naomi would forget. Because he believed survival mattered more than promises. Years passed. Naomi grew up fast. Her grandmother's back bent more each year. The diner aged. The neighborhood changed but never improved. And somewhere far away, Ethan climbed. Education, business, money, each step taking him further from the boy who once waited behind a diner for a black girl who fed him when the world wouldn't. But neither of them ever truly forgot. They just learned how to live with the space where each other used to be. The notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, folded twice and slipped under the diner's front door like it was ashamed of itself. Naomi found it before sunrise. She had come down early to help Mrs. Alvarez prep for the breakfast rush, the way she had done for years now. The diner was quiet at that hour, humming softly with the sound of the refrigerator and the old wall clock that never kept perfect time. Naomi bent down to pick up the envelope, already sensing that it wasn't good news. Good news never came unannounced in this neighborhood. It never came on cheap paper. She read the first line, then the second. Her fingers tightened. Notice of acquisition, scheduled demolition pending. Her breath caught, but she didn't let it show. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her jacket pocket just as Mrs. Alvarez came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything okay, Mija?" the older woman asked. Naomi nodded. "Yeah, just cold." But it wasn't the cold that made her hands shake. By noon, the entire block was buzzing. Word traveled fast when it was bad. People stood outside shops reading their own notices, arguing, crying, shaking their heads like they had seen this movie before and already knew the ending. Redevelopment. That word again, always said like a blessing, always felt like a threat. Naomi stepped outside the diner and looked down the street. The buildings hadn't changed much in years, cracked bricks, boarded windows, faded murals that still tried to tell stories of pride and survival. To outsiders, it looked abandoned. To the people who lived there, it was home. Inside the diner, customers whispered. Some were angry, some were resigned. Mrs. Alvarez leaned against the counter like the weight of it all had finally caught up to her. "They say we got 90 days, she muttered. "After that, it's done." Naomi didn't answer. Her mind had already gone somewhere else. Upstairs, her grandmother was asleep. Ruth Turner had been getting weaker lately. Her steps were slower, her breathing heavier. Naomi had learned to listen for the rhythm of it through the thin ceiling, learned to tell when it was safe to relax and when it was time to worry. Naomi climbed the stairs quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. She watched her grandmother sleep, the lines on her face carved by decades of work, sacrifice, and stubborn dignity. This place, this diner, this apartment, this street, was everything Ruth had ever managed to hold on to. And now someone with money and a clipboard thought they could erase it. Later that afternoon, a black luxury car rolled into the neighborhood. It didn't belong there. Everyone felt it before they saw it. The car moved slowly like it was studying the place, measuring it. People stopped what they were doing. A few kids pointed. A man selling fruit on the corner shook his head. Naomi was inside the diner, wiping down tables, when the shadow crossed the window. She looked up. At first, she didn't recognize him. The suit was expensive. The shoes were spotless. His posture was confident in a way that came from never having to apologize for taking up space. He stood just inside the doorway, scanning the room like he was looking for something or someone. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Naomi's chest tightened, though she couldn't yet explain why. The man looked away quickly like he had been caught staring. He swallowed and stepped further inside. Mrs. Alvarez glanced up. "We're open," she said cautiously. "I know," the man replied. His voice was calm, controlled, but under it something trembled. "I used to come here." Naomi felt the air change. She studied his face more closely now. The sharp jaw softened by memory. The eyes, those eyes, held something familiar, something old. Her hands froze around the rag. "No," she whispered before she could stop herself. The man turned toward her fully. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the diner faded, replaced by the distant echo of a different time. Buzzing alley lights, laughter, the smell of warm bread torn in half. "Naomi," he said finally. The sound of her name in his mouth hit harder than she expected. Years collapsed into seconds. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely steady. He nodded once. That single motion carried everything he hadn't said in 15 years. Mrs. Alvarez looked between them, confused. "You two know each other." Naomi straightened. Her walls went up fast, built from years of disappointment and learned caution. "We did," she said, "a long time ago." Ethan took a step closer, then stopped himself, like he wasn't sure what he was allowed to do. "I didn't know if you were still here," he said. "I wasn't sure if." "If I survived," Naomi finished for him. The words came out sharper than she intended. A few customers looked over. She didn't care. Ethan flinched just slightly. "I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," she said. "People always assume this place chews us up." There was a beat of silence. Then Mrs. Alvarez cleared her throat and retreated to the kitchen, sensing something private unfolding in public. Ethan glanced around. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Naomi hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to protect the life she had built without him, but curiosity and something older, deeper, won. "Out back," she said, "same place." The alley hadn't changed much. The same cracked concrete, the same rusted dumpster, the same faded wall where someone had once painted a sun that never quite looked warm enough. They stood there now, older, heavier with years. "You left," Naomi said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "I didn't think I had a choice," Ethan replied. "I was scared." "So was I." He nodded. "I know." She studied him. "You came back rich." He almost laughed. "Almost? Is that what it looks like?" "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what it looks like." Ethan took a breath. "I came back because I heard the diner was being demolished." Naomi stiffened. "Then you already know why I don't have time for this." "I know," he said quickly, "and that's why I'm here. I can help." There it was. The thing she had known was coming the moment she saw the suit. "I don't need saving," Naomi said. "I didn't say you did." "You didn't have to." Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched at her sides. "You left," she continued. "You built a life somewhere else. This is ours. You don't get to show up now and decide you care." Ethan felt the words land like blows. He deserved them, every one. "I never forgot," he said quietly. "Not you, not this place." Naomi shook her head. "Remembering isn't the same as staying." Before he could answer, a man's voice cut through the alley. "Well, this is interesting." They turned. A tall man in a tailored coat stood near the mouth of the alley, smiling like he owned the place. His eyes flicked over Naomi dismissively before settling on Ethan with recognition. Didn't expect to see you down here, the man said. Mr. Cole, right? Ethan's jaw tightened. Naomi felt it immediately, the shift in power, the way the air bent toward money. And you are, she asked. The man smiled wider. Marcus Hale, I'm overseeing the redevelopment project. The word hung heavy between them. Marcus glanced around the alley. Hard to believe people are so attached to places like this, he said lightly, but progress always upsets someone. Naomi stepped forward. This isn't just a place. Marcus barely looked at her. It rarely is to those who can't see beyond it. Ethan felt something old and familiar rise in his chest, anger sharp and unignorable. This conversation isn't over, Marcus added, adjusting his cufflinks, but enjoy the nostalgia while it lasts. He walked away, confident. Naomi stared after him, then turned back to Ethan. Now you see, she said, this is what we're up against. Ethan watched Marcus disappear down the street. And for the first time since he was a hungry boy behind a diner, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Running away wasn't an option anymore. Marcus Hale's footsteps faded, but the damage he left behind stayed heavy in the alley. Naomi crossed her arms, grounding herself. She had learned long ago not to let men like that see her shaken. Power fed on reaction, and Marcus Hale looked like a man who ate confidence for breakfast. Ethan broke the silence first. That's who's behind it. Naomi nodded. He bought half this block already, the rest is just paperwork and pressure. Ethan stared at the cracked wall, at the faint outline of the painted sun. He talks about it like it's nothing. That's because to him it is, Naomi replied. We're just numbers on a report, obstacles. Ethan felt a familiar heat in his chest, the same kind he used to feel when adults talked over him as if he weren't standing right there. Back then, he had been powerless. Now he was, and that realization scared him more than it comforted him. I can stop this, he said before thinking it through. Naomi turned sharply. No. The firmness in her voice surprised even him. I'm serious, Ethan continued. I have influence, lawyers, media, I know people who. No, Naomi repeated louder now. You don't get to ride in like some hero. Ethan flinched. That's not what I'm trying to do. But that's how it always looks, she said. A rich man shows up, suddenly everyone listens. Suddenly the story isn't about us anymore, it's about you. Her words cut deep because they were true. Ethan took a step back, giving her space. Then tell me what you want. Naomi hesitated. That question had weight. For years, she had survived by not wanting too much. I want respect, she said finally. I want them to look at this place and see people, not property. I want my grandmother to sleep at night without worrying she'll be forced out before she dies. Her voice cracked just slightly on the last sentence. Ethan noticed. He always noticed her strength, but now he saw the cost of it. I can't promise I'll do this perfectly, he said, but I won't do it without you. Naomi studied his face. She searched for the boy she once knew, the one who used jokes to hide fear. She found him older, scarred, but still there. Before she could respond, a sharp cough echoed from the diner's back door. Naomi spun around. Her grandmother stood there, wrapped in a thin cardigan, one hand gripping the doorframe. Her eyes were sharp despite her frailty, taking in Ethan with quiet assessment. Naomi, Ruth said, who's your friend? Naomi moved quickly to her side. You shouldn't be up. I'll sit when I'm ready, Ruth replied, then looked back at Ethan. You look familiar. Ethan swallowed. I used to spend time here when I was a kid. Ruth's gaze softened slightly. Ah, she said, the hungry one. Naomi stiffened. Ethan's cheeks burned, but he nodded. Yes, ma'am. Ruth smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, but knowingly. I wondered what became of you. That single sentence carried no judgment, just acknowledgement. They're trying to tear the place down, Naomi said quietly, as if saying it too loudly might make it more real. Ruth followed her gaze down the alley, then out toward the street. They've been trying to erase us for a long time, she said. Sometimes with bulldozers, sometimes with silence. She looked back at Ethan. And what brings you back now? Ethan met her eyes. I owe something, he said simply. Ruth studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. Debt can be a powerful thing, she said, if it's paid the right way. That night, the neighborhood buzzed with tension. A community meeting was announced at the rec center. Flyers appeared on doors. People argued in hushed voices. Some were angry, some were afraid, some had already given up. Naomi sat at the small kitchen table in the apartment above the diner, reviewing the notice again. Her grandmother rested on the couch, listening to the evening news with the volume low. "They want to buy us out," Naomi said. "Offer relocation." Ruth snorted softly. Relocation means displacement with nicer words. Naomi hesitated. "Ethan wants to help." Ruth glanced at her. "And how do you feel about that?" Naomi didn't answer right away. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to slam the door in his face. Another part remembers he was just a kid, too." Ruth nodded. "Pain doesn't disappear just because time passes," she said, "but neither does kindness." The next evening, the rec center was packed. Folding chairs scraped against the floor. Voices overlapped. The air smelled like sweat, coffee, and frustration. A representative from the development company stood at the front with a rehearsed smile. "This project will bring jobs," the man said. "Opportunity, growth." "For who?" someone shouted. Naomi stood near the back, arms crossed, heart pounding. Ethan stood a few rows away, deliberately separate. He wore a simple jacket, no tie. Still, people noticed him. Marcus Hale arrived late, as if on purpose. He took the microphone with ease. "Change is never comfortable," he said smoothly, "but it's necessary." Naomi couldn't stay quiet anymore. She stepped forward. "Necessary for who?" she asked, her voice clear. Marcus smiled politely. "Miss, I understand emotions are high." "You don't understand anything about us," Naomi cut in. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "You don't live here, you don't raise children here, you don't bury your elders here." Marcus's smile thinned. "Progress requires sacrifice." Naomi's hands shook, but she didn't stop. "Funny how it's never your sacrifice." Applause broke out, real loud, defiant. Marcus raised a hand. "Let us be realistic, this neighborhood is struggling." "That doesn't make it disposable," Naomi shot back. Before Marcus could respond, Ethan stood. The room went quiet. "I grew up here," Ethan said. "On these streets, in that alley behind the diner." Heads turned, whispers spread. "I left because I had to," he continued. "But I'm standing here now because I learned something. Success built on erasing people isn't success at all." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the place for personal stories." "It is when your plans are personal," Ethan replied. Naomi watched him, conflicted. He was doing exactly what she feared, drawing attention. But he wasn't centering himself. He was exposing something deeper. "I ate because people here shared what little they had," Ethan said. "You call this area broken. I call it the reason I'm alive." The room erupted. Marcus stepped back, reassessing. Naomi realized then, this confrontation wasn't just about buildings. It was about who got to define worth. And whether promises made in hunger could still matter when money finally showed up. The meeting ended without resolution, which somehow felt worse than defeat. People spilled out of the rec center in clusters, some angry, some energized, some quietly crushed. Naomi stood near the doorway, watching neighbors argue strategy like chess players who'd lost too many games to believe the board was fair. Ethan stayed back, giving her space, but the distance didn't make the tension disappear. If anything, it stretched it thin, like a wire pulled too tight. Outside, the night air felt heavy. The streetlights flickered, casting uneven halos on the pavement. Naomi hugged her jacket closer and started walking toward the diner. She didn't turn to see if Ethan followed. She didn't have to. His footsteps fell into pace a few steps behind her, careful, respectful, unsure. "Back there," he said finally. "I didn't mean to." "I know," Naomi cut in, not slowing down. "But meaning well doesn't change impact." They walked in silence for half a block. A police cruiser passed slowly, eyes lingering longer than necessary. Naomi noticed. Ethan noticed her noticing. Another quiet truth sat between them. At the diner, Naomi unlocked the back door and stepped inside. The smell of coffee grounds and old oil wrapped around her like a memory. She flipped on the lights and leaned against the counter, exhaling. Ethan stayed near the doorway, hands in his pockets, like a guest who didn't know if he was welcome. "You shook things up," Naomi said, staring at the counter. "People are hopeful now, that's dangerous." "Hope is all they have," Ethan replied. So is disappointment. He nodded. That's why I'm not leaving again. The words landed heavier than he expected. Naomi looked up at him sharply. Don't say things you don't understand the cost of, she warned. I do, he said. I've been paying it for years. Naomi studied him, really studied him. The confidence, yes, but also the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he thought about the past. Money hadn't erased him, it had armored him. Marcus Hale won't back off, she said. He'll smile, stall, and then bulldoze us anyway. Then we don't let him control the timeline, Ethan replied. We make this public, not just emotional, documented. Naomi crossed her arms. You mean lawyers? And journalists, he added, and records zoning violations, displacement data, patterns. She laughed once, humorless. You talk like someone who's been on the other side of the table. I have, Ethan said quietly, and I didn't like what I saw. Upstairs, Ruth coughed, a sharp, rattling sound that cut through the conversation. Naomi moved instantly, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. Ethan followed more slowly, guilt tugging at him like a physical thing. Ruth sat upright in bed, breathing shallowly. Naomi knelt beside her, offering water, steady hands, practiced calm. I heard voices, Ruth said after a moment. Meeting didn't go well. It went, Naomi replied. That's about it. Ruth's eyes shifted to Ethan. You made noise. Ethan nodded. I hope that's okay. Ruth studied him. Noise brings attention, she said. Attention brings resistance. I know. She smiled faintly. Good, then you know what you're walking into. The next few days blurred together. Ethan postponed meetings, rescheduled flights. He set up a temporary office in a small hotel nearby, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. Naomi noticed. She didn't comment, but it mattered. They worked separately and together. Naomi gathered stories, neighbors facing eviction, families pushed out with nowhere to go. She knew who to talk to, who to trust, who had been burned before. Ethan pulled records, property transfers, shell companies, city council donations. Patterns emerged, ugly and undeniable. Marcus Hale didn't stay quiet. A glossy flyer appeared in mailboxes promising new beginnings. Renderings of sleek buildings replaced familiar streets. Smiling faces that didn't look like anyone Naomi knew filled the pages. At the diner, customers argued over coffee. He says jobs, one man said. He said that last time, another replied. Ask the folks 2 blocks over how that worked out. Naomi listened more than she spoke. She learned who was scared enough to sell and who was stubborn enough to fight. Both were understandable. One afternoon, Marcus himself walked into the diner. The bell above the door chimed. Conversations died instantly. Marcus smiled like a man who enjoyed being watched. Relax, he said. I'm just here for lunch. Naomi stepped out from behind the counter. We're busy. I'll wait. He took a seat at the counter, folding his coat neatly. His eyes flicked to Ethan, who sat in a corner reviewing notes. Marcus's smile widened. Didn't expect you to stick around, Marcus said lightly. Ethan looked up. Didn't expect you to show your face. Marcus chuckled. Transparency, people appreciate it. Naomi set a glass of water down hard in front of him. Say what you came to say. Marcus leaned back. I came to offer peace, he said. Sell now, get a premium, fight, and things get complicated. For who? Naomi asked. For everyone, Marcus replied, gaze steady, including your grandmother. The threat was soft, polite, clear. Ethan stood. Don't. Marcus met his eyes. This is business. No, Ethan said. This is intimidation. Marcus shrugged. Call it what you want. The city's on my side. Cities change, Naomi said. People remember. Marcus rose, smoothing his jacket. People forget, he corrected. They always do. After he left, the diner felt smaller. Naomi's hands shook as she wiped the counter. Ethan watched, anger and fear colliding inside him. He crossed a line, he said. He crossed it a long time ago, Naomi replied. This is just when you noticed. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching headlights pass, listening to her grandmother's breathing. Memories surfaced uninvited, waiting behind the diner, counting minutes, believing someone would come back. Downstairs, Ethan sat alone in the booth, head in his hands. He replayed Marcus's words, hated how easily they slid into place. Power recognized power. That was the problem. The next morning, a city inspector showed up. He cited the diner for minor violations, things that had existed for years without issue. The timing wasn't subtle. Mrs. Alvarez sank into a chair, face pale. "They're trying to choke us out." Naomi clenched her jaw. "We fix what we can, we document everything else." Ethan made calls. Pressure met resistance. Doors opened and closed. A local reporter agreed to listen. A council aide returned an email. Small cracks appeared, but so did consequences. Naomi noticed a car idling across the street some nights. Marcus's people, maybe, or maybe just fear sharpening into paranoia. Either way, the stress took its toll. Ruth's cough worsened. Naomi carried guilt like a second spine. One evening, Naomi and Ethan argued in the alley, their first real fight. "You don't get to decide how far this goes," Naomi said. "This is our home." "And I won't let them destroy it," Ethan shot back. "You don't live here." "I did," he replied, "and I owe it." Owing isn't the same as belonging. The words hung there raw. Ethan stepped back, hurt flashing across his face. "Then tell me where I stand." Naomi faltered. She didn't have an answer that wouldn't cost something. From the shadows, Ruth watched through the back door, seeing two people circling the same wound from opposite sides. The fight ended without resolution, again. But something had changed. Lines were drawn, stakes raised. The system had noticed them. And Marcus Hale was no longer smiling. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as procedure, policy, and polite smiles. Within days of the inspection, the diner received another notice. Then another: fire safety, plumbing, accessibility. Each one cited with calm authority, each one demanding money, time, or compliance Naomi knew they didn't have. Mrs. Alvarez tried to joke through it at first, but the jokes wore thin quickly. "They're bleeding us slow," she said one morning, staring at the papers spread across the counter. "Like they want us tired enough to quit." Naomi folded the notices neatly. "That's exactly what they want." Ethan watched from the corner booth, jaw clenched. He had seen this tactic before: death by paperwork. It was clean, legal, and devastating. "I can cover the costs," he offered. Naomi didn't even look at him. "No." "Naomi." "No," she repeated, sharper now. "If you pay, they'll say this place only survived because a rich man stepped in. They'll wait you out." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then we need leverage." "We need community," Naomi said, "and time." Time was the one thing Ruth didn't have. Her health declined steadily over the next week. Nights grew longer. Her cough deepened, echoing through the apartment like a warning. Naomi barely slept, balancing work, meetings, and caregiving with the precision of someone who had no choice but to hold everything together. Ethan noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed when her phone buzzed. He wanted to help. He didn't know how without becoming the problem. One afternoon, Naomi snapped at him over nothing. An email, a suggestion, a tone. "I'm not your project," she said, voice shaking. Ethan absorbed the blow without responding. He nodded once. "I know." That night, he did something different. Instead of calling lawyers or journalists, he walked the neighborhood alone. He listened. He talked to people Naomi hadn't had time to reach yet. Elders on stoops, parents walking kids home, shop owners who remembered when the block was louder, brighter, fuller. He didn't introduce himself with titles, just his name, just his story. Some were skeptical, others surprised him with warmth. "You were that skinny kid," one man said, squinting at him, "always hanging by the alley." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, that was me." Word spread, not fast but steady. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale escalated. A press release went out praising the redevelopment as community forward. Photos showed Marcus shaking hands with selected residents. People offered generous buyouts in exchange for quiet cooperation. The message was clear. Resistance was unnecessary. Progress was inevitable. Naomi read the article with clenched fists. "They're dividing us," she said. Ethan nodded. "Classic strategy." "And it works," she replied. "People are scared." The next community meeting was louder than the last. Voices overlapped. Accusations flew. Some residents argued it was time to take the money and leave. Others demanded they fight to the end. Naomi stood at the center of it, trying to hold a line that felt like it was fraying by the minute. Ethan spoke less this time. When he did, he backed Naomi, not himself. "This isn't about nostalgia," he said. "It's about consent." Marcus attended again, flanked by city officials. His smile was thinner now, his patience clearly worn. "You're dragging this out," he said to Naomi afterward, low enough that only she and Ethan could hear. "All for a place that will be gone either way." Naomi met his gaze. "Then why are you still here?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. Control didn't like resistance. 2 nights later, the diner's front window was cracked. Not shattered, just enough to send a message. Mrs. Alvarez cried quietly as Naomi swept up the glass. Ethan stood outside, scanning the street, fists tight at his sides. "This is harassment," he said. "This is intimidation," Naomi replied, "and it's working." The reporter Ethan had contacted finally published a piece. It wasn't front page. It didn't name Marcus directly, but it told the story of a neighborhood under pressure, of quiet displacement masked as development. People started paying attention. Emails flooded in, supportive messages, offers of help, also threats. Naomi read them all. Ruth passed out one morning while Naomi was at the diner. The call came fast, too fast. By the time Naomi reached the apartment, paramedics were already there. Ruth was conscious but weak, her eyes glassy with pain and exhaustion. She squeezed Naomi's hand with what little strength she had left. "Don't stop," she whispered, "no matter what." Naomi nodded, tears blurring her vision. "I won't." At the hospital, Ethan waited in the hall, pacing. He felt useless, every instinct screaming at him to fix something, anything. But this wasn't a problem money could solve. It was time and bodies and systems that didn't care. When Naomi emerged, face pale, Ethan stepped forward. "She's stable," Naomi said quietly, "for now." They sat together in silence, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space where words couldn't reach. "I'm scared," Naomi admitted finally. "Not of losing the diner, of losing her." Ethan swallowed. "I'm here." She nodded, not looking at him. "Just don't leave." The words weren't a plea, they were a boundary. "I won't," he said. The city scheduled a final hearing. This time it mattered. The room was packed. Media cameras lined the walls. Residents wore shirts printed with the diner's name. Naomi stood at the front, steady despite the weight on her chest. Marcus spoke first, confident, polished, rehearsed. Then Naomi stepped up. She didn't shout, she didn't beg. She told the truth. About her grandmother, about growing up here, about feeding a hungry boy behind a diner because kindness felt like the only thing that couldn't be taken away. Ethan spoke last. He didn't talk about success. He talked about debt, moral debt, the kind you carry whether you acknowledge it or not. The room was silent when he finished. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft, steady, familiar. Naomi looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and for the first time since he'd returned, she saw not just what he had become, but what he was choosing to be. The decision wouldn't come that day. But the tide had shifted, and Marcus Hale knew it. The moment truth can no longer be ignored. The day of the final decision arrived without ceremony. No banners, no sirens, just a gray morning that felt heavier than it should have, as if the sky itself understood what was at stake. Naomi stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the apartment above the diner, adjusting her collar with hands that were steady only because she forced them to be. Her reflection looked older than her years, not broken, hardened. The kind of strength that came from carrying too much for too long. Behind her, Ruth sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a thick sweater despite the mild weather. Her breathing was shallow but even. She watched Naomi with eyes that missed nothing. "You don't have to be fearless," Ruth said softly. "You just have to be honest." Naomi turned. "What if honesty isn't enough this time?" Ruth smiled faintly. "It never feels like enough, that's how you know it's real." Downstairs, the diner was closed for the first time in years. Chairs stacked, lights off. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "At City Hall, fighting for home." People gathered outside anyway, neighbors, supporters, reporters. They walked together toward the building, not chanting, not shouting, just showing up. Ethan arrived quietly, wearing a plain jacket, no logos, no signals of wealth. He didn't stand beside Naomi at first. He walked a step behind, exactly where she had asked him to be. Inside City Hall, the chamber was full. Every seat taken, people standing along the walls, cameras set up, red lights blinking. City council members whispered among themselves, glancing at their notes, their watches, the crowd. Marcus Hale sat confidently near the front, legs crossed, expression calm. His lawyers flanked him, papers neatly organized. He looked like a man who expected the world to move when he asked it to. The chairperson called the meeting to order. Procedures, formalities, the language of power wrapped in politeness. Marcus spoke first. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket, and walked to the podium like he owned the space. His voice was smooth, measured, practiced. "This project represents opportunity," he said. "Jobs, housing, growth. We cannot let sentiment block progress." He gestured toward a screen displaying sleek renderings of the proposed development. Glass, steel, smiling faces that didn't look like anyone in the room. "This neighborhood has struggled for decades," Marcus continued. "We are offering a future." Naomi watched the council members' faces. Some nodded, some avoided eye contact. Marcus finished with a smile. Change is never easy, but it is necessary. He returned to his seat, to polite applause from a few corners of the room. Then Naomi stood. The noise died instantly. She didn't bring notes, she didn't need them. "My name is Naomi Turner," she began. Her voice was calm, clear, unshaking. "I was raised above a diner on Maple Street, the same diner you're discussing as if it were an empty lot." She paused, letting the words settle. "My grandmother cleaned offices for 35 years. She paid taxes. She followed the rules. She raised me to believe that if you work hard and treat people right, you earn your place." She looked directly at the council. That diner fed more than customers. It fed kids whose parents were working double shifts, elders who couldn't afford groceries, people the system forgot. Murmurs rippled through the room. Naomi continued, voice tightening just slightly. "You call this progress, but progress that requires erasing people is just theft with better branding." Marcus shifted in his seat. Naomi took a breath. "I'm not asking you to stop development everywhere. I'm asking you to stop pretending this one doesn't have a cost." She stepped back. There was no applause at first, just silence, thick and uncomfortable. Then one person clapped, then another. Soon the room filled with sound, raw, emotional, undeniable. The chairperson raised a hand. Order. Next speakers followed, residents, shop owners, teachers, stories layered on stories, fear, anger, love. Marcus's smile disappeared completely. Finally, the chairperson cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you requested to speak." Ethan stood. The room reacted instantly, whispers, curiosity, tension. Marcus looked up sharply now, eyes narrowed. Ethan walked to the podium, heart pounding but posture steady. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at Naomi, just for a moment, then at the room. "I wasn't supposed to survive this neighborhood," Ethan said. The words landed hard. "I slept behind buildings, I stole food, I was invisible." He swallowed. "The only reason I didn't starve is because someone here shared what little they had." He gestured gently toward Naomi. "She fed me when no one else would." The room leaned in. "I left," Ethan continued, "because survival demanded it, and I spent years convincing myself that success meant escape." He paused, letting the truth catch up to him. "But the higher I climbed, the clearer it became. Every dollar I earned stood on a foundation built by people I left behind." Marcus stood abruptly. "This is irrelevant." The chairperson raised her hand sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Hale." For the first time, Marcus obeyed. Ethan continued, "I am not here to save anyone, I am here to testify." He turned slightly, facing the council. "I have reviewed the acquisition records, the shell companies, the zoning exceptions, the campaign donations." A murmur spread, louder now. "These projects disproportionately displace low-income communities of color," Ethan said. "And they do so legally, because legality and justice are not the same thing." Marcus's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. Ethan's voice hardened. If this council approves this demolition, you won't just be approving a project. You'll be endorsing a system that rewards erasure. The chairperson leaned forward. Mr. Cole, she said carefully, are you prepared to submit these documents for public record? Ethan nodded, yes. Gasps, cameras clicked rapidly. Marcus shot to his feet. This is outrageous. This man has a personal agenda. Naomi stood too. So do you, she said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. The room erupted. The chairperson banged the gavel. Order, order. Marcus's composure cracked. You're turning this into a spectacle. Naomi faced him fully now. You turned our lives into a transaction. Silence fell again, this time sharper. The council called a recess. People poured into the hallway, buzzing, arguing, crying. Reporters swarmed. Phones rang nonstop. Naomi stood by a window, breathing hard. Ethan approached slowly. You okay? He asked. She nodded, then shook her head. I don't know. Ruth sat nearby, wrapped in her sweater, eyes bright despite the exhaustion. You spoke truth, Ruth said. Whatever happens now, remember that. Minutes later, the council reconvened. Everyone returned to their seats, tension coiled tight. The chairperson cleared her throat. After reviewing the testimony and the submitted materials, this council is issuing a temporary injunction. The room froze. The demolition is halted, pending a full investigation into the acquisition process. For a second, no one reacted. Then the room exploded. Cheers, tears, shouts. Naomi covered her mouth, stunned. Ethan closed his eyes, breath leaving him in a rush. Marcus stood rigid, face pale. This isn't over, he hissed toward Ethan as the room buzzed around them. Ethan met his gaze calmly. No, he said, it's just finally begun. Naomi turned toward Ethan, emotion flooding her expression. Relief, anger, gratitude, grief, all tangled together. You didn't leave, she said. Not this time, he replied. As they walked out of City Hall together, the crowd parted for them, not because of money or power, but because of truth that had finally been spoken out loud. Above them, the sky began to clear. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something being taken. It felt like something being fought for. The city did not change overnight. The morning after the injunction, Maple Street looked the same, cracked sidewalks, familiar storefronts, the diner's faded signs swaying gently in the breeze. No parades, no sudden miracles, just a neighborhood waking up after a long, exhausting night, unsure whether to celebrate or brace for the next blow. Naomi unlocked the diner early. For the first time in weeks, she moved without the weight of urgency pressing into her chest. The place smelled like coffee and old oil and something else she hadn't felt in a while. Relief. She flipped on the lights and stood there for a moment, letting the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock settle her nerves. Outside, a small line had already formed. People came in quietly at first. A nod here, a soft smile there. No one said much, but everyone understood what it meant to sit at those tables again. Survival didn't always look like victory. Sometimes it just looked like staying. Ethan arrived later, careful not to draw attention. He paused in the doorway, taking it in, the clink of cups, the low murmur of conversation, Naomi moving behind the counter like she belonged to the rhythm of the place. She glanced up and caught his eye. Coffee, she asked. He smiled, please. They didn't talk much at first. They didn't need to. The space between them felt different now, not empty, not tense, just honest. The investigation moved slowly, the way systems always did when forced to look at themselves. Committees formed. Records were requested. Marcus Hale's name appeared in articles alongside words like scrutiny and ethics review. He didn't disappear, but his certainty did. The man who once walked through the diner like it was already gone now stayed far away. The pressure eased, but it didn't vanish. Some residents still sold their properties. Some needed the money. Some were tired. Naomi never judged them. She knew survival came in different shapes. What mattered was that the choice was theirs again. Ruth returned home from the hospital weaker but alert. Naomi rearranged the apartment to make it easier for her to move around. Ethan offered help once, just once, and waited. Ruth accepted. Not money, not favors, just time. Ethan started stopping by in the evenings, sitting at the small kitchen table while Ruth told stories Naomi had heard 100 times and still listened to like they were new. Stories about cleaning offices late at night, about walking home in the dark with aching feet and unbreakable pride. Stories about raising a black girl in a world that would demand she shrink. "You fed him," Ruth said one night, nodding toward Ethan, "but you fed a lot more than his stomach." Naomi looked away, uncomfortable with praise. Ethan cleared his throat. "I didn't know how to come back," he admitted. "I thought if I did, I'd have to face everything I left." Ruth studied him. "You did," she said simply. "That's enough." Naomi and Ethan found a rhythm that surprised them both. They walked the neighborhood together, sometimes talking, sometimes not. Ethan listened more than he spoke. He learned the names of people he'd once passed without seeing. Naomi watched him learn, watched him slow down. There were no dramatic declarations, no sudden romance, just trust rebuilt carefully like something fragile that deserved respect. One afternoon, Naomi found Ethan sitting alone in the alley behind the diner. "The same spot," she said. He looked up. "I wanted to remember it right." She sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. "I used to think that promise was stupid," Naomi said eventually. "Something kids say because they don't know any better." Ethan nodded. "I used to think breaking it was necessary." She glanced at him, and now I think promises are less about words," he said, "and more about whether you show up when it counts." Naomi considered that, then she nodded. The diner began hosting community meetings again, not crisis meetings, but planning ones, workshops, potlucks. People brought dishes from home. Laughter returned, cautious but real. A local nonprofit offered support without strings attached. A legal clinic helped residents understand their rights. The neighborhood didn't become rich, it became informed. Ethan declined interviews. When reporters called, he redirected them to Naomi, to the residents, to the story that had always existed without him. It wasn't humility, it was responsibility. Marcus Hale eventually reached out through lawyers. Offers softened, conditions changed. The project was restructured, scaled back, forced to acknowledge the people it would affect. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't erasure. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the diner glowed warm against the darkening street, Naomi closed up early. She climbed the stairs to the apartment, where Ruth sat by the window, watching the light fade. "You did good," Ruth said quietly. Naomi swallowed. "We did." Ruth smiled. "I won't be here forever." Naomi's breath caught. "But I'll leave knowing this place didn't disappear quietly," Ruth continued. "That matters." Later that night, Ruth slept peacefully, her breathing soft and even. Naomi sat beside the bed, holding her hand, feeling the rise and fall of her chest like a fragile promise. Ethan waited downstairs, staring at the old photographs on the diner walls. Faces, moments, history. He felt the weight of it all settle into him, not as guilt this time, but as purpose. When Naomi came down, eyes tired but dry, he stood. "She's resting," Naomi said. He nodded. "I'll walk you home." They stepped outside together. The street was quiet, familiar, still standing. Naomi stopped in front of the diner and looked at him. "You don't owe us your life," she said, "just your honesty." Ethan met her gaze. "That's something I can give." They stood there for a moment longer, two people shaped by the same place in different ways, finally facing it together. No promises were spoken. They weren't needed anymore. What mattered was what remained, after hunger, after power, after the system tried and failed to erase them. The diner lights went out one by one, and Maple Street, scarred but breathing, held on to another night. This story is not about a diner, or a lawsuit, or a powerful man being stopped. It's about who gets seen, and who is expected to disappear quietly. For too long, the world has been built to reward distance from suffering. Those with power often believe good intentions are enough, that success excuses silence, that progress means moving forward even if people are left behind. Ethan believed that once, not because he was cruel, but because the system trained him to believe that leaving was necessary to survive. Naomi represents the other side of that lie. She shows us that survival isn't just about escaping hardship, it's about protecting what gives a community its soul. Her fight was never about winning or revenge. It was about dignity, about the right to stay, about refusing to let history be erased because it's inconvenient or unprofitable. The story reminds us that systems don't collapse because of one bad person. They survive because of many quiet choices, to look away, to stay neutral, to say, that's just how it works. Real change begins when someone chooses discomfort over convenience, truth over silence. Ethan's redemption doesn't come from money, influence, or saving the day. It comes from listening, from stepping back, from letting the people most affected lead their own fight. That's the difference between help that controls and help that respects. Ruth's presence teaches another lesson. Resilience is not loud. It lives in routine, in sacrifice, in love passed down through generations. People like her don't ask for praise, they ask for fairness. And often they don't even ask, they endure. That endurance deserves protection, not pity. The moral is simple, but not easy. Progress that destroys people is not progress. Promises mean nothing without presence. Community is not a weakness, it is a form of power. This story asks us to look at our own lives and question where we stand. Are we benefiting from systems that harm others? Are we silent when our voice could matter? Are we willing to stay, even when leaving would be easier? Because sometimes, the most powerful act is not rising above where you came from. It's turning back, standing still, and saying, this place matters, these people matter, and they will not disappear.
This story is not about a dinner or a lawsuit or a powerful man being stopped. It's about a cat seen and who is accepted to disappear quietly. Far too long, the world has been built to reward distance from suffering. Those with power often believe some good intentions are enough. That succeed excuses silence. That progress means moving forward even if people are left behind. Ethan believed that once, not because he was cruel, but because the system trained him to believe that living was necessary to survive. Naomi represents the other side of that lie. She shows us that survival is not just about escaping hardship, it's about protecting what gives a community its soul. Her fight was never about winning a revenge. It was about dignity, about the right to stay, about refusing to let history be erased because it's inconventional or unprofitable. The story reminds us that systems don't collapse of one bad person. They survive because of many quiet choices. To look away, to stay neutral, to stay that's just how it's works. Real change begins when someone chooses discomfort over convenience, truth over silence. Ethan's redemption does not come from money, influence, or saving the day. It's come from listening, from stepping back, from letting the people most affected lead their own fight. That's the difference between help that control the help that respect. Such presence teach other lesson. Resilience is not loud. It's live in routine. It's sacrifice in love passed down through generations. People like her don't ask for paradise. They ask for fairness. And often they don't even ask. They endure. That endurance deserves protection, not pity. The moral is simple but not easy. Progress that destroys people is not progress. Promises mean nothing without present communities that weakness. It is a form of power.